Has PET become the world standard of management, in particular of cancer patients? Lots of other uses as well in cardiac patients to mention other things, but I'm just going to, for the moment, focus on PET scanning because that's by far and away the major use of PET scanning. The awesome power of radioactive sugar. This, for the chemists in the group, or the audience, is a 6-carbon standard garden variety sugar, except on the bottom there we've got an F18 minus there. That is a fluorine minus. It's an F18 on the 2-carbon position, and what's been known since the late 20s is if you inject a billionth of a gram of this into a patient, the cells in the body think it's sugar, they happily take it up, but then realize it's not really sugar, and so they block it in the cell, and so the stuff just keeps coming into the cell and doesn't go out the back door, as it were, and doesn't get metabolized, so the signal builds up inside, and that therefore allows us to image where sugar is going in the body. Now, and that is what is used in an FDG PET scan. Now, all cells in the body can use sugar, but it turns out the cancer cells absolutely must use sugar. They really have no choice. They also are very inefficient. They use as much as 8 times as much sugar to do their dirty work. So what happens is cancers typically stand out against the background. So if we look at these images here, there's brain at the top, there's lots of other tissues, liver and heart and bladder and so on, all normal tissue that are taking up sugar. But these really dark black areas you can see here with the little lines pointing to them, this is abnormal. Now, it may not be cancer, it may be something else. In this case, it turns out that it was. But as you can see, that this tells us, gee, something very active is going on there, and ultimately you probably need tissue to determine what that is. Now, here's an example of using the awesome power of sugar to follow a treatment monitoring in a lymphoma patient. The image at the top is the PET scan again, and those black areas with the yellow arrows pointing to them are areas of lymphoma tissue, and the CT below that with the arrows pointing is there is a mass sitting in the anterior chest there. That simply shouldn't be there, but remember that the CT scan has limited ability to determine whether it's active or not, and that's the point of this. So the patient goes on and they have their treatment, and they get their follow-up PET scan, and now that chest is negative. Now there are other changes you might notice, darker bones and things like that. That's another issue. It's actually a consequence of one of the treatments they used. It's not actually cancer, but that's another issue. But the point is that this patient also had a CT scan, and guess what? That mass is still persisting on the CT scan. Now, but you know what the PET scan is very strongly suggesting is that this is not cancer. This is scar tissue. But without the PET scan, that most likely this, if the patient just had the CT scan, they'd say, well, look, we need to give this patient more radiation. It would have been devastating for this particular patient. But live in Ontario, and they use the CT scan, remember, to direct whether or not you get a PET scan. It is an extraordinary thing. Now, there's currently about 6 rules for PET in oncology. There's about, depending where you are in the world, but there's anywhere from sort of 12 to 14 cancers that PET has various indications for. Some of those current potential rules are diagnosis of cancer, in other words, particularly in directing whether you need a biopsy or not. It's used in staging cancer to see whether or not, where it's spread. In the initial workup phase, as you saw the example of treatment response, it's used, is cancer come back after you've treated them, or does it come back years later, the restaging, recurrent tumor. Definitely used in radiation therapy planning. You can dramatically reduce the amount of radiation therapy fields to a cancer patient by 60% or more by combining the PET with the CT planning, but not if you live in Ontario. Now, but the point is each one of us is physiologically unique. And the power of FDG PET is that it assesses the patient's own physiological response to treatment. Now, the other thing just before closing here is that PET is not just limited to injecting sugar, the FDG sugar. That's the F18 when we're using it. There are many other isotopes or other isotopes that we can use in PET scanning that use carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. And these are all natural substances in the body. If you look at fluorine compounds, there's well over 50 compounds now that are used for various things for looking at brain metabolism and all sorts of issues about cancer metabolism and unique uses in patients that are becoming more widespread, unless you live in Ontario. But basically, the sky is the limit. If you've got a bunch of really good radiochemists, then you can build just about anything you want for these radioactive compounds, as we will image various aspects of patient physiology and abnormal physiology and tumors and disease into the future. It really is, at the moment, PET scanning is the ultimate in functional or metabolic imaging. So there it is. FDG PET scanning is the cornerstone of personalized molecular medicine. Let's make a change. Let's bring this about in Ontario.